Um, well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are in the world. We'd like to thank you for attending another NSSG Talks, where we get into in-depth discussions on global risks. Today, we have a very kind of special guest who will enlighten us on the situation happening in Israel and the wider region, and also kind of provide some insight into the global implications of the ongoing war happening in Israel at the moment. Today we have with us Major General David Tsur, retired of the IDF. He has a distinguished career, I'd say around 27 years of distinguished service, both in the kind of public and private sector security. And I'll let him kind of elucidate on that as well. So here's his bio. In 1977, he started out in the IDF into the paratroopers regiment. In 1980, he then was involved in the Israeli police counterterror unit called the YAMAM. He was later appointed commander of that unit in 1991. In 1996, he was seconded, if that's correct, David, to work for the 1996 Atlanta Summer Olympics as a security advisor. He then returned to Israel and he served on the Chief of Staff at the Ministry of Homeland Security. From there, he had various kind of distinguished roles, important roles as well, in the private sector as well as the public sector. A lot of youthful experience, and I'm sure throughout this discussion that we're going to have with David, he will kind of lace through his previous events and appointments and positions to provide more context into his expertise as well as what's going on today as well. He's thankful enough to kind of give us time to kind of provide us with his expertise and experience and insight into this particular topic. David, would you like to add anything to your experience and your bio here that I haven't?
Maybe 2 points. As a general, I was the general in charge for the borders, the border guard police, especially on the Jordan Shamaria and the Egypt border in Gaza also. And my last position, I was the chief of police of Tel Aviv District, which is the largest district in Israel. And the Knesset, I served in a few committees, which many of them were security, homeland security committees, and some more sensitive, mainly on the security issues, 2 years as a parliament member. And from there, I'm running my company for a security consulting company. And that's about it.
Yeah, thank you very much, David. I should also point out that I didn't point out in the kind of admins section is that we are recording this webinar for GDPR and compliance purposes, and we will provide the recordings to all the attendees and all the registrants after we've done this. So you should receive that either at the end of this week, early next week. So do apologies for that, missing that admin point. David, I'd like to kind of provide a bit of context into the situation in Israel and again, the wider region and the kind of global implications. And for that, we have to step back briefly in history to start with 7 October, the Hamas attacks in Israel and the subsequent events, basically, because what was initially perceived, I guess, from the outside world as a kind of event, a very horrific event that happened on October 7th. There was a lot of uncertainty and speculation as to how long the event would last, this kind of conflict, and what were the kind of possible scenarios in terms of escalations, and would it lead to a broader conflict involving multiple stakeholders? There were some that said that, this could be over and resolved within weeks or months, basically. But here we are, entering into May, well beyond 6-month period into this situation here. Right now, there's a lot of uncertainty as to where it's going. And this is why you're here today, to kind of provide us with that insight. So we have here a map of Israel. Again, showing a bit of context as to what's been happening so far in Israel. And David, maybe you can kind of provide some more context into this particular map and illustration, as well as the timeline events from the very beginning, weeks and months of the event. We do have another slide as well of the wider region, to kind of illustrate all the other kind of external stakeholders that have been involved in the conflict, as well as kind of critical timeline events as well. So, David, do you have any comments on this particular map illustration?
Well, maybe I'll let you finish, and then I'll do all the.
Okay. Okay, great. The next map I'd like to show is of the kind of broader region. So, and what's been happening to date. So, not to get too involved in the kind of tactics and operations in terms of attacks and whatnot, but there have been kind of significant developments beyond Israel and Gaza and the West Bank as well. And so, it only took a matter of weeks before we saw kind of manifestations of proxy conflicts kind of related to the events in Israel. And I think the kind of first stark realization was 19 November, when the Houthis based in Yemen hijacked the Galaxy Leader in the Red Sea. Now, this triggered huge alarm, probably going back to and kind of resonating with people familiar with Somali piracy back in the 2000s, if you will. And I know there have been kind of periodic attacks in the Red Sea, particularly in the Straits of Hormuz, as well as the kind of the Mandal-Bib Straits as well. But since then, we've seen a series of escalations there, which has caused a lot of concern in the oil and gas sector, as well as kind of supply chain logistics. And so from that, on 19 December, we had a accusation of a cyber attack from Israel against Iran. The operation was known as Predatory Sparrow. The hack was known as Predatory Sparrow. And then from there into the new year, 11 January, we've started to get more kind of diplomatic maneuvers, you know, at the UN in particular, when South Africa kind of leveled genocide case against Israel at the UN. From there, we had 21 February, we had Iran blaming Israel for two attacks on the South-North gas pipeline. And then from there, as the situation got worse in Gaza in terms of the humanitarian crisis, we had the first kind of mass mobilization of aids dropped into Gaza from foreign donors. Then on 13 April, the RGC seized an Israeli-linked ship in the Straits of Hormuz. And then we saw this really unprecedented attack from Iran in the direction of Israel. Dozens of ballistic missiles and drones heading towards it. Thankfully, they were all intercepted. Then on 19 April, we had Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh arriving in Turkey for talks, basically, to seek kind of support from the Turkish government. And the other thing I'd like to point out is the 23 April, when the U.S. Senate passes a foreign aid package for Israel, which came as a huge relief for the Israeli government. But to juxtapose that against the other side of what makes kind of Israel-U.S. relations quite difficult is last week as well, the U.S. Department of Treasury imposed sanctions on two entities in Israel, and those entities for funding kind of extremist attacks against kind of Palestinians as well. The latest news is that there's speculation that the U.S. government will also impose sanctions on the specialist military unit battalion in the IDF as well, and that has not kind of taken place yet. But this kind of illustrates the complexities that the U.S. has with the Israeli government. And I'd like to conclude right there on the timeline of events. David, do you have any kind of additional comments to make on that?
No, it's okay.
Okay. Okay, so next, I'd like to go into some discussion points. David, regarding Israel, could you give us, your kind of insight on the internal conflict developments that have happened so far to date? And possibly what might help fight is if I go back to that earlier map.
Yeah. Okay. First of all, thank you for having me. I want to say 7th of October was the worst attack incident which occurred in Israel. And I'm saying that even, we had so many wars and so many incidents, but we never faced something like that, which actually entered our territories, and by that penetration caused so dramatic damage, casualties, and hostages incident, which we never faced like this. The only comparable maybe war which I can elaborate to that is the 73 war, the Yom Kippur War, which there's a lot of parallel issues, and unfortunately I must say that we as a country which built it on the security, and for me as a security person which served almost 30 years in uniform, this is something dramatic which actually we even don't start to explain to ourselves how come that we did almost the same mistakes we did in Yom Kippur War. So I want to explain in general what I think happened, and then maybe zoom in what happened. If I go to the 6th of October, which we are actually feeling very confident with the security measures that we took in Gaza, especially in Gaza in the south, and also in the north. The threat from the north, and I will speak about it maybe later, was all the time the concept that if we're facing some kind of threat, it's going to become from the north, from Hezbollah, which is the main proxy of Iran, controlling in Lebanon. Actually, Lebanon is almost a non-state, because Hezbollah is actually ruling full security in Lebanon. The Lebanese army, it's kind of a facade. And Hezbollah became very strong, especially after the role which they took in the war against ISIS for the last 10 years, let's say. In Syria, they practiced themselves, they were supported by Iran, and they were very much influenced in eliminating ISIS in Syria. So they became very powerful, and also actually they said to Iran, now you have to pay for it. And also Syria, of course, they are obligated. So there is very good connection between Syria, Iran, and Hezbollah. Hamas, we have to understand, it's a Sunni. The Sunnis against Shia, they hate each other much more than maybe they hate the Jews and the Israelis. But in this case, Hamas was actually, because it was split in 2007 from the Palestinian Authority, from the Fatah, which is the main movement in the Palestinians. So they felt that in order to be supported by a kind of a very strong entity, they start to have a good connections for years with the Shia, with Iran, with the proxies, and they are very well connected also with the PIJ, which is the Palestinian Islamic Jihad group, which is more, let's say, connected to the Shia, but they are small militant group in Gaza. So from 2007 till 2024, let's say, we had a few rounds of confrontation against Gaza, and I must say that none of them was really handling the real problem in Gaza and the security concept of Israel on Gaza for years. And not only that government, which I have a lot of criticize about that government, how they took, and mainly the Prime Minister Netanyahu, which maybe will try not to go into politics, but I can't avoid from putting the blame on the concept and what we call the conception of the which actually was the main mistake in 73, because there are four pillars, let's say 4 pillars or 4 layers of security, which Israel mainly was looking in the region. One of them is that Hamas is deterred. Why? Because we hit them a lot, we are stronger, we are arrogant, We are very good. We have a very good military, so they are deterred opening a war against Israel. First mistake. The second one, we have the best intelligence in the world. And we know everything which is happening in Gaza. Mainly, it's true. We have a very good intelligence. We have a very smart, what's called A200 unit, which can collect everything. We have the best Shabak, Shin Bet, which is the interior security. The Mossad is very good, can hit in the middle of Tehran if it's necessary, the leader of the nuclear initiative, and etc., etc. But the main, and I'm saying it as a security person, you know, today, because of the mass data, which is very available in collecting, once the collecting was the main challenge for the intelligence of units. Today, the main challenge is the fusion, because we have a mass of data. So many things we can look, and we saw it. They were listening. We saw the training going on. We saw the tunnels that they're building. We saw our observation units, mainly the girls, was looking at them very close to the fence. We were facing a lot of demonstration and riots on the border almost weekly, burning and doing demonstration, throwing stones, etc. Israel was acting not as an act of war against them. We have a fence, so we were all the time looking at that as part of the demonstration. So we knew a lot of things, but it was against the concept. The concept was that they are deterred, they don't have any motivation for that, and they want, and we will know before. The third layer is the defense. We are we invested in a very technology fence. We blocked almost all the tunnels which are coming from Gaza under the fence. We put the concrete which is blocking this option. And actually, they didn't enter from those tunnels. Unfortunately, they entered from above. And the fourth one is that we have very good response units, so they can react. So all those four layers, mistake, because they weren't deterred, the intelligence was lousy, they didn't understand what's really they want in plan. The fence was actually, every time they were demonstrating, they were putting bombs there, preparing themselves for the day. And unfortunately, the forces mainly were in Jada and Shamaria, because there was a lot of threats, intelligence that there are going to be some terror activities in that holiday day. And the 7th of October actually started like a fully surprise. Very, very similar to what happened to us in Yom Kippur War. They entered from more than 40 places in the fence. If you go, please, Joe, to the map of Gaza. I don't think we have a map of, you can look at Gaza, but mainly Gaza is 40-kilometer length and not more than 10 on the, if you can show it, it's a very, very tiny territory, but mainly all the villages, the Israeli kibbutz, moshav, which is a very small communities surrounding Gaza. If you can share with me so I can use my mouse.
You should be, let me, a second.
Share screen.
So David, you should be able to share it.
Yeah. Let's see.
If not, you could just direct me.
Okay, never mind. So what I want to show is that we have our villages actually surrounding Gaza all over. from the south, Kerem Shalom, till the north, which is Erez Netiv Asara. So in the moment they penetrate, they caused a huge damage. Unfortunately, that day we had a very big concert, very close to the border, like 1.5, 2 kilometers from the border. A very large concert, young people, beautiful people who came to celebrate, and they found themselves in a battle in a second, and they didn't know even where to run, and they were slaughtered, raped, kidnapped, and they are not the only one. It's also happened on the kibbutzim and other areas. So from that point, the damage which caused only in that day, we had a very few, let's say, units who reacted quickly. We had less than we should, and they fought like heroes. We lost more than 350 soldiers and more than 800 civilians, and more than 250 were kidnapped as hostages. And this, we find ourselves for almost like 2 days, almost 48 hours, fighting to release this piece of land of Gaza, and they penetrate like the area, not very deep inside, but they penetrate the border. And this was a very shocking for us. And what he actually had in mind, because when we look strategically, this is a very strange way of thinking for us, but it's for him. This is the main. He's like Salah ad-Din. He planned that attack for years, and he saw himself of releasing the Palestinian from the occupation. I'm saying because I want to again remind you, in Gaza there's no occupation, because we left Gaza till the last centimeter, and there's no one Jew in Gaza land on the 6th of October, on the 7th of October, since 2007. The border between Gaza and Israel mainly was closed from the sea and also from the land, besides of the fact that all the economy of Gaza is dependent on Israel. Goods which are coming to Ashdod airport, seaport, and from there by land from the Erez, which is on the north part of Gaza, and going in. And there is a very large 2 main gates entering to Gaza from the south, which is from Egypt, because all the south part of Gaza is with Egypt. So there are 2 main entrances. One, which is Israeli controlling, which is Kerem Shalom, and the other one is Rafah checkpoint. You have to understand what Gaza means. It's a 2.2 or 2.4 million people on a very, very tiny, as you see it here, the brown green on the southwest with the sea. For years, they were supported by the international community, and Israel is giving and allowed to bring money from Europe, from Palestinian Authority, and unfortunately from Qatar. The main thinking of, let's say, strategically, the Prime Minister, especially this Prime Minister, but not only him, but I must say that he's like 15 years, so he can't say, I'm not the one in charge. So for 15 years, and more dramatically on the last 2 or 3 years, every month, Israel was supporting, allowed to bring them $30 million for a month, like $360 million for a year from Qatar. Qatar is the main supplier of the Gaza. Let's speak very quickly about the role of Qatar. Qatar is the face of the Sunni, very, very religious Sunni country here on the Gulf, yeah, playing a role which is a very, look like moderate role. American see them as an ally. Israel is having a very good connection with Qatar, not formally, but a lot of business, and also they look at them as the mediators for everything which is going into Gaza before the 7th of October, and especially after 7th of October. Al Jazeera is the main press for Arab countries. Al Jazeera is broadcasting till today from Israel too. Even there was a law now that wants to block them from broadcasting because Al Jazeera took a role at the 7th of October attack, definitely by the fact that they were broadcasting almost live from the attack. So we know that they were part of the plane, and they entered immediately with those 2,000 to 3,000 Nukhba, which means the main Nukhba is the commando of the Hamas, and with the other which entered after them in the second wave, which the regular Gaza people, which came, still took everything they could and move back to Gaza. It took a few hours for the army, for the military and special forces. The unit which I used to command, the YAMAM, special units, YAMAM, the Air Force unit, Shaldag, Matkal, which is the main, like the Delta Force, the army helicopters units, etc. It took them besides of the Air Force, but those special units, because they build themselves in a very special way to jump quickly to any place in the country, they were in a very short time, like 1 hour, 1.5 hours, they were already in the borders, and they fought against those forces, minority against a majority of terrorists coming in, slaughtering, shooting, raping, doing everything which is beyond imagination. The picture wasn't clear at the beginning, so the 7th and the 8th of October was a very, very dramatic time for us. By the end of the day, as I said, we lost more than 1,200. My unit lost 9 guys. Matkal lose 9 guys, which for small units like this is a very dramatic. The Shin Bet lose almost the same numbers, which is unbelievable. And in total, we lost more than 350 soldiers. From that time, there was a decision to declare a war. A war was declared actually, and as you mentioned, Joe, it took like almost 2 weeks to start the invasion to Gaza. The plan was to first of all to go into the main city of Gaza. In generally, Gaza is divided to 4. On the north part is the city of Gaza and other villages, small neighborhoods. In the middle, it's called the camps. Then Khan Yunis, which is a very large and the main Hamas city, which actually Yahya Sinwar was he was born there, and this was his headquarters. And on the south, we're talking about Rafah. Between that, we have 2 main camps, which is Dir Balach and Nuseirat, which is now we're dealing with them. We almost not going into tactical details, but I think you saw on TV, it's a very complicated place to fight, because we're talking about 2.4 million people into a very crowded area. We had to push most of the population from the north to the south. Actually, they built kind of a refugee camp in Rafah, so we could fight against, in Gaza, the largest city, which is 1.2 in Gaza. And actually, we almost finished all the militant groups in Gaza, including in the hospital of Shifa, which, if you remember, we left Gaza, we let them come back to Shifa Hospital, because we saw that in Shifa Hospital, they built kind of a very large commanding and control for the militant groups. And we arrested a lot of them. We got a lot of intelligence from Shifa Hospital. Khan Yunis, we finished also. And actually, we created kind of a safe zone on the middle of Gaza, going from Netzarim, from east to the west till the beach. Also, we created a secure zone all the way from the north to the south of about 1 kilometer, that actually we clean it from any population. So we have a buffer zone between Gaza to the Israeli territories.
Excuse me, David, because so yeah, thank you for all of that, all those details, and providing that kind of context, and what the IDF has done up until now. Because we're getting on then time, and you kind of segue to Oman. I'd like to kind of broaden the discussion to the regional implications. In your previous kind of comments, you hit upon some very good kind of points, and one is the fact that despite all the kind of best facilities, people, funding you have to kind of ensure your security, and the intelligence activities and support, it takes me back to kind of an old mantra or saying that I came across years ago, is that intelligence is a kind of failure-driven industry. And what I mean by that is that improvements don't happen in the kind of intelligence space unless some kind of catastrophe happens. And so we've got a lot of lessons from that, from the fall of the Berlin Wall to 9/11, and and to now to the Israel's kind of version of 9/11, which has been what it's been called. So so you kind of talked a bit about Oman and its role in the kind of conflict as well. And what I'd like to kind of segue into now is, again, the kind of regional actors that are involved in this. Yeah. And obviously there's Iran with the kind of drone and ballistic missile attacks, plus its kind of proxy actors as well that are involved in the conflict, that are having kind of a lot of implications on the economy, if you will. And the stark example of that is what's happening in the Red Sea, right, with Yemen and the Houthis. But then there's also the question of Ismail Haniyeh's kind of recent visit to Turkey as well. And what is Turkey's role in this kind of conflict? And what could they potentially kind of offer? So if you can kind of make some comments, yeah. We'd love to hear your insight on the regional actors as well.
Yeah, it's very important what you're saying, because what Sinwar, and I was just about to speak about what Sinwar thought when he launched this attack. First of all, as I said, he's ideological. He's like Salahuddin. He thought to do something that is so dramatic, and he succeeded. But what he thought at the beginning, at the 7th of October, that immediately Hezbollah from the north, Iran from the east, Iraq and Syria, and other proxies like Yemen, Houthis, will join this battle, and we will have to face all full war from all those frontiers. It didn't succeed. In a way, we see today that first of all, the Houthis, as you said, which is the Sunni part of Yemen, is threatening the safety of the routes, of sailing routes to the Suez Canal. Actually, it's a very painful, mainly for Egypt, less for Israel, although I must admit it caused a problem in a way that the ships which are coming from the east, they can't go through the Suez Canal and to the Red Sea, come to Eilat, which is our south. If you go back to the Israeli map, so this is actually the entrance from the south, which actually blocked. The second threat, of course, is who disappointed very much Hamas, is the fact that Hezbollah actually started launching. Until today, we are kind of having with them, they shooting missiles, we shoot on them, but it's not a fully war which we start with them. Unfortunately, we had to evacuate a very large portion of in the north. Iraq is taking play in a way, attacking more American assets in Iraq. We're talking about Shia Iraq, because Iraq is divided, as you know, to a lot of tribes, and the Shia is the government today. But again, it's launching missiles from Iraq, crossing Jordan, Jordan having a very, very important role on protecting their airspace, but also they're kind of I can't say they're proxy of Israel, but definitely they're playing a very important role. And they did a very important job in the 14th of April from the large attack which actually Iran launched. This is a dramatic strategic turning point, because Iran, this was the first time that Iran attacked Israel from Iran. In 91, we faced the same maybe attack from Iraq when Saddam Hussein launched like more than 45 missiles, ballistic missiles to Israel. And Israel didn't attack Iraq that time. The Americans and the British mainly took the responsibility to protect Israel. In this attack, we saw more than 350 missiles were launched from Iran. The main missiles were drones, small drones, which they're not so small. It takes them more than 10 to 12 hours to arrive. 50 kilos of explosive in each one of them. All of them were dropped either by the Americans or by our airplanes or by our air defense. More than 120 ballistic missiles, which they're much heavy explosive, like almost half a ton. Again, most of them were launched by the heads and by the Americans, by us, by the Israeli forces. I think like 4 penetrated our defense, and they hit it in some of them in the desert and some of them in a base, in a air base in Nevatim, which were they wanted to hit the F-35. And the cruise missiles, all of them were intercepted. So Israel actually showed that we have the capabilities to protect ourselves in the defense meaning. But again, strategically, this is a huge achievement to bring Iran not in with the proxies, but at the frontier. So if I want now, because we're running in time and I want to leave kind of the 10 minutes at least for questions, as you said, I want to talk about the risks and opportunities. What are the strategic risks that we can see? First of all, is expanding this confrontation, not only against Gaza and Lebanon, which are directly bothering us. And I'm saying bothering in a way because they are not threatening the existence of Israel. Let's face it, Israel is not in an existence threat. But strategically, if we're talking about Iran, we see that Iran lost the deterrence from coming in front and acting against Israel. And it's not only against Israel, it means against the West. It's against the don't, which the president of the United States said. We know, we very much appreciate his way of standing besides of Israel, but definitely we understand the weakness now of being in the election process So is trying to contain this confrontation and not to launch an attack, which in my opinion, it will come. It will have to come. Maybe after the elections, but it can't avoid, because we're talking about the nuclear agenda which Iran is taking, and definitely if they will achieve to that point, and they are very close to that, we will face a huge amount of trouble. The second issue is the threat of the as I said, and the consequences of the threatening the maritime routes, which today some of them are closed. You mentioned it before in your opening remarks, and this is something which I can't understand. How come that there is no much more aggressive against the Houthis? Because it's not an Israeli issue. Of course, Israel is maybe the catalyst for them to act, but it's like criminals. I mean, they hijacking ships, they're attacking ships. This is a huge issue which Americans with the West, talking about Britain, American, France, creating a coalition to protect those areas. What is the threats for Israel more, the risk? Jordan is in a very shaky position. As I said before, they took an action which we are very much satisfied what they did. It's a great coalition was created in this attack from Saudi to Jordan to Egypt, with the moderate Muslim countries, which they signed in a peace agreement with Israel, and the Abraham agreements, which show that it's a very important coalition with the moderate Sunni countries, which they're sharing the same Shia enemy like us. But Jordan is in a very shaky area because demographically, Palestinians are the majority in Jordan. So the Hashemi kingdom, which is based on the Bedouins of the Abdallah, the grandfather of the king of today, is a minority in Jordan. And for years, Israel, America, is supporting Jordan. And it's very important for us that Jordan kingdom would be strong, because this is the east part of the frontier of Israel. And this is a very strategic point that we have to keep it with that. Economy, this is a huge threat also, as I said before, because they're blocking the area, and also sanctions which they want to push in some of the countries. Stupidly, I see a lot of demonstration in the universities, and people who doesn't understand exactly what is the real conflict. What are the opportunities? The opportunities, and I'm talking strategic opportunities, and I will speak in a second about the business opportunities also, as we as a security people. For us, the main opportunity today strategically is to create with the Americans the Saudian initiative, which means that we are taking this opportunity to isolate the Shia, Iran, all the proxies, and to move forward with the American suggestion, which means that Israel politically inside will have to decide to create kind of a solution for the Palestinians. This is something which this government definitely can't do because they are so extreme. So this is something very difficult maybe to do in Israel politically. We're a democracy country, but we will have to remove this government and to create a rational government which can create, which take this opportunity strategically, and from that crisis to create this strategic opportunity with the Americans. In the north, we will have to, it's a time that we will have to create a different equation, that we can't remain with this threat from the north. So I think maybe we won't do it simultaneously, but I think this crisis creates opportunity to solve this problem. With Iran, it's a great, I think, timing to create a sanctions against Iran and to isolate Iran. Probably it will happen, as I said, after the elections. A few words about the business opportunities, which I think will have, it's something we all have to take in mind. First of all, the rehabilitation of Gaza sooner or later will come, and it's already in a way started. Americans are bringing this so-called port. There are a few entrants for aid, for humanitarian aid, and all of them need security forces to come. Civil security. After, we will have, Israel will have to finish the job. Probably will have to go into Rafah in a few weeks. And after that, this rehabilitation will create a lot of opportunities of business for not only for the Emirates, Saudi, Egyptian, but also for security forces. The Jewish communities all over the world, we see the anti-Semitic. This is something which also for security, the demand will be huge, okay? Maritime security. As I said before, it's a huge threat on the maritime movement, the route of ships. So definitely they will have to raise the demand for security for that. And I think even it's a huge crisis today in the Middle East, but there's a lot of opportunities to those who are willing to take risk and to move into that region. In general, very quickly, I went into, because a lot of things more to say, but we're running in time, so I'll maybe let some time for questions.
Yeah, thank you for that, David. So we are trying to get the chat function to back on. So we're working in the background to get that done. So once that's up and running, hopefully we'll get some questions from the audience. If not, then we can certainly take questions if you send it to us in an email. And the email address is servicedesk@nssg.global. Again, it's servicedesk@nssg.global. We will collate all those questions, run them with David, and he'll be able to kind of provide the answers to you, and then we'll kind of distribute them to the participants in a kind of general email, along with the kind of recording as well. So we do apologize that we have the chat function disabled at the moment, but we're trying to get it back up and running. David, you've certainly unpacked quite a lot in this 45 minutes that we've had so far, that I'm sure that we could spend hours and hours and hours kind of discussing. What I like to get into is the kind of risk versus the opportunities, basically. And I think, again, there's a lot of uncertainty as to when this conflict will end in its kind of current form, basically. And so you mentioned that there's opportunities to kind of rebuild and reconstruct parts of the Gaza Strip, if you will, as well as elsewhere. But right now, when will that be, for example?
Yeah, okay, maybe it's a good question for the timeline. Actually, the north part, the main city of Gaza, as I said, and going to the north, will be kind of a pilot to use a few corridors, which are secure corridors from the north and from the west to the east, including the Netzarim corridor, which goes all the way to the sea into that deck which the Americans build or building. So this actually is going to happen in approximately in a month or something like that. Even today, we're entering like more than 300, 350 trucks in a day. What we see from they dropping from the air, it's more like show. It's a facade, because every time they throwing this aid from the air, it's like 1.5 truck, okay, in total. And we saw that it's on the air of sometimes it's falling on the people, killing like more than 10 every time, and it's more like a show. So those corridors will start to be more efficient after the decision of the government to let the ships to come to Ashdod, and from Ashdod to make the route to go to the south and enter inside and to supply this aid. About the south, and I think you mentioned at the beginning that everybody thought it would take like a month or two. Actually, the military from the beginning said it will take more than a half a year. So we're still in the timeline. Unfortunately, in my opinion, we should have taken before the what's called Philadelphia Road, which is the 14 kilometers going from the sea to from the west to the south, which is the Egyptian border, and mainly the tunnels are there for smuggling weapons, goods, and everything. And I mentioned before, I was the general for the borders. I know some of those families personally from all sides, from Gaza, from Sinai, and from Israel. Those are Bedouins tribes, which their expertise is on smuggling. For us, it's a criminal activity. For them, it's a way of living. So it's a very, when I was there, the general, and I was coming to talk to them, so they said, General, with all the respect, we are here before you and your grandfather, before the Turks, before the English mandate. So we don't recognize those borders that you put. So it's a main issue of mentality. So by controlling those smuggling routes, we can create this different reality. So again, to your question, it's about of very few months that we will see that this war will be more like we're doing today in Jada and Shamaria, which we're going and hitting some cells, but mainly the war is over. Actually, we don't admit that, but for the last 2 or 3 months, the movement of the military is in a very low intensity. So the action against Rafah, which is the mainly what is remain is 4 battalions from the 24, which we already killed most of them and eliminate. So we have enough more 4 battalions that we have to take care in Rafah, and another 2 battalions in the middle of Gaza. So that, if there's no deal on the table, which will bring the hostages back, so Israel will take an action, and it will happen like in 2 or 3 weeks from now, going into Rafah. So after that, as I said, we as a private sector can have a role on assisting on the security of the humanitarian aid.
Okay. Hey, David, we actually got some questions sent to that email address, and Lily's got visibility of that, so hopefully she'll be able to kind of read it to you. That's all right.
Sure. Thank you so much, Joe. Sorry for the technical issue with the chat, and thank you for all of the people that have sent already some questions. So we have a question coming from Bruce. Is Benjamin Netanyahu due to resign now, given the whole situation, given the faults that you underlined, David? What's your opinion?
It's a very delicate political question. I wish they would, but unfortunately they won't. So we need to push them in a democracy way. There is a lot of issues. Netanyahu actually is saying we need to finish the war, and then we will go into investigation and we let the people to decide. The elections are being planned for 2026. Nobody is really, because in the coalition now we have the 2 former generals, the chief of staff, Benny Gantz and Gadi Eisenkot, which they are opposition to the prime minister, but because of the war, they now collaborating together. So once they move out, it will be the time that the pressure of the public will be to dismiss this parliament, Knesset, and to go to the elections. There is another option, which is there's a lot of talks putting on the table that the president will push them to put an acceptance timeline for elections at the end of the year. And by that time, if Netanyahu wants to, again, to participate in those elections, so the polls show that he's going to lose. But you know, I'm enough time in the Israeli politics to say that those polls are maybe accurate the day they are published. So we can't say nothing. But to a question, I don't see the government dismissed, resign.
Yeah, you talk about pressure and exerting pressure, and that pressure comes from different forces, right? So you've got the domestic political pressure, and then you've got the kind of external pressure, namely, I would say, from the U.S. government, right? So I kind of said earlier that, you know, there's a kind of a complex relationship that the U.S. government has with the Israeli government. In one sense, you know, the U.S. Senate approved this kind of multi-billion-dollar kind of aid package, and in the other sense, the government has kind of issued sanctions against these kind of ultra-Orthodox kind of movements, basically. And so, in that sense, you know, because of this kind of complexities, and take into consideration that it's a U.S. Election year, and no U.S. administration wants to get dragged into a kind of broader conflict. So a lot of things probably won't be decided until after those elections, basically, and depending on who is voted into the office, the trajectory of relations and the Middle East politics and this conflict can go either way, basically. And so, could you provide some kind of insight or comments on, you know, what can the U.S. do to kind of influence, or can it do anything to influence the outcome of the war at this current stage, or do we have to wait till after the elections?
Well, the elections in the state are influencing what's happening here, but in a way, it doesn't have to, the timeline of the war can't be connected to the elections in the state. Definitely, it's been reflected by the fact that Biden is not feeling maybe to act as maybe he wanted to be free from that. But you know, politics is part of the arguments we calculate. The pressure, I must say that in Israel, we don't like I think a lot of countries, that somebody is interfering in the interior politics of Israel. So in a way, even we were wishing that Netanyahu government will resign. We don't want it to happen because of the Americans, because they are doing sanctions, etc., because this is not only against the government. About the ultra-Orthodox battalion, almost there's a consensus in Israel that is something that shouldn't be done. It's a political decision. I'm very familiar with that battalion. In general, they are doing a very important job, and they have also a very important social role, because we are pushing the ultra-Orthodox to be part of the serving in the army. It's true that they are being pointed in positions that we don't want them to comfort all the time against the Palestinians. So this is a discipline issue which have to be taken very good care in disciplined way. We have our independent legal system, the judicial system. So this is something that Americans have to release and to give us the opportunity to put them in trial and to judge them. If we're going back to what happened before the 7th of October, the main demonstration in Israel was to keep the democracy in a way that our judicial system will be independent and not dependent on the government. So it's a very, very crucial point in Israel, and it's still independent.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for that. Often the kind of connections between politics and the military and national defense, you know, often kind of conflict and collide, doesn't it? although in a democracy you need some kind of like civilian oversight of the military, or else you have a kind of dictatorship. Right, we've got a couple more questions, David, for you. More of a kind of geopolitical oriented questions, and I'll let Lily kind of again read the first one out to you. Go ahead, Lily.
Thank you, Joe. So yeah, as you said, from a geopolitical perspective, the Iran coordinated attacks on Israel. John is asking, what's your opinion about having Russia behind those attacks involved, only to open another front that the world will look at while they're carrying on their conflict in Ukraine? If you want to comment on that.
Definitely Russia, we having kind of a very complicated and delicate relationships with Russia, let's say, for years. And we knew ups and downs, and actually Israel, I think wrongly, didn't took the right moral part in the war between Ukraine and Russia, because we said Russia is having a very important role in Syria and in the Shia areas, and also they actually have foot on the ground in Russia, in Syria, and Israel is keeping a very open skies in Syria to attack the movement of the goods to Hezbollah coming from Iran, Iraq, Syria, and then directly to Hezbollah. So actually we were doing this with under the table with a lot of talks with the Russians, okay? So formally we have a very good diplomatic relation with Russia, and we don't want to harm it. But in the long run, what we see now happening because of the war with Ukraine, that Russia, which I was very surprised and shocking by the fact that Russia is dependent on the military support of Iran, technology, and the drones which they were bringing from Iran, using them in Ukraine. And this is something, unfortunately, as I said, we had to see it before it happened in the 7th of October, because they use the same methods and the same almost weapons. I must say that the attack, and I don't want to be in an arrogant position, because we've been there enough before 7th of October, but I must say that what we see from the missiles they launched, the Iranian, especially the drones, it's not a big threat that you can't deal with. Israel invested a lot of money with the Americans on the R&D, and also in I don't think there is any country in the world which have the defense protection of the Air Force like we, because the threat is so serious. And I think this is something, and I know, I'm not only thinking that, this is one of the main exports that Israel today is exporting Europe and some other places, because we saw that the missiles can go from Iran to any place in Israel, but they also very quickly they can go to Europe. The distance is not an issue. So I don't know about Britain, but I know about the middle of Europe. So this is a very, very important. And actually, Joe, you mentioned Turkey also. As one who was born in Istanbul, and I have my sentiment to Istanbul, I must say that the role which Erdogan is playing is very also dramatic in this area, economically, and also being a Sunni, a very hardcore Sunni, that he wants to take the role of Egypt or Saudi for years, but he doesn't have the power for that and the influence. Although we didn't spoke about it even a word, but I have to mention it because it's a huge research to speak about it. If we want to be the impact against global terrorism, Iran and their proxies, we have to hit them by the money movement and the crypto, all the money laundering which they're using, banks in Qatar, in Dubai, in Turkey, directly going to weaponize those terror groups. This is an international effort, which actually the Mossad in Israel is very much on it. We have all the details we need, but its actions should be taken against Iran and their proxies in order to block it. And
Yeah,
Turkey is one of the main banks hostile.
Yeah, I think the flow of money in these kind of situations is quite critical in terms of kind of a business risk, right?
Yeah.
Because that's kind of tied into sanctions risk, right? So you've got to be careful of your vendors, your third-party vendors, your partners that you're dealing with, and the business dealings that they have that may directly or indirectly support this war on either side, basically. But again, certain business may not notice that they're indirectly kind of involved in this war from a kind of financial perspective. And so, one more question, David, and I'll let Lily again kind of read that out to you. And after this question, I think we'll kind of conclude there. But we have one more question. So Lily, go ahead.
Thank you, Joe. So yeah, from a geopolitical perspective, we understood the situation, but behind states there are human. And we have a question from Valentin, thinking about the future of the Abraham Accords. What's your opinion, David, about that? What about the humanitarian side of this conflict and how it's impacting the worldview?
Well, I must say that the image of what we're doing in Gaza, there's no comparable, I think, in any other war. In a way, as I said, 7th of October was a disaster in every meaning, that they slaughtered babies, women, people, they didn't even rape, did unbelievable things. The hostages is the issue which is actually keeping this war going on. And in a way, I must say, it's playing for Netanyahu and for Sinwar, unfortunately. Because once we had the hostages back, the clock will tick back to Israel to put the pressure to stop. Americans can't put the pressure on Israel to stop the war, because there's no reason and there's no reasonable politician who will say to Israel, okay, the hostages, you have 133 hostages, forget about them, and let's move now to regular day. So the hostages have to be solved in the first priority. Once this has been solved, as I said, I see that even the government, this radical government of Israel, is opposed, because they have to pay something for the Palestinian Authority to be independent entity in some territories, which we know the price. And we're discussing it for years. And Gaza will be part of it. So once we can move this, we can solve the hostages issue, the pressure on Netanyahu to move forward with the Abraham initiatives and to expand them to a formal diplomatic relation with Saudi and to create this coalition, which actually have to pay something for the Palestinian, actually will solve the problem, at least on the south part. About the north, very quickly maybe answer about the north. I don't think we're going to open a war this time on the north, although, in my opinion, maybe we should at the beginning, because they opened actually a war against us. But we need to prioritize the thing, and actually the government took a reasonable decision. So probably we're going to back to 1701 decision of the UN, which actually is moving the military forces from the Litani River, which is about 10 to 14 kilometers, going to the north, and allowed those the villages and cities on the north to go back into a normal life. I don't think it will again drop the threat, but one way or another after the elections, those elections in November in America, any president who would step in will have to take a very quickly decision what is going to be with Iran. Is it going to be a very hard sanctions to drop this government down, or a military action?
Yeah, yeah. I think timeliness is an appropriate term to kind of end on here. So we have to conclude this webinar. David, thank you very much for your insights. I found them hugely valuable. I'm sure the rest of us at NSSG and our audience has also found them hugely kind of insightful and beneficial as well. For those of you that are still on and would still like to kind of send us questions, we will kind of send them to David for him to answer later, and we'll send them the answers and the replies with the recording of the webinar as well. Again, that email address is servicedesk@nssg.global, servicedesk@nssg.global. For now, I'd like to conclude this webinar. Thank you very much, David,
Sure.
for taking the time out to kind of, again, attend this and again, give us your expertise on a very kind of complex subject matter at the moment. So for the rest of you, thank you very much. We will have more NSSG talks in the coming months, and we'll kind of send out some adverts on that to let you guys all know. Have a good evening, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.